Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we are joined by Adrian Yip. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be on here. It was a little bit difficult, to set this up being in a different time zone, right? You're in Hong Kong right now, working at UBS, investment banking, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But starting from the beginning to give you a bit of an intro, you graduated from PET in 2019. At PET, you were on DECA, which we talked a little bit offline. It really gave you an intro to business, really, and kind of reinforced your passion for business. And then you graduated from Ivy Business School in 2023. And then, as I mentioned before, you're working in investment banking in Hong Kong. So we talked a bit about DECA. Are there any other experiences that stand out for you from your time at PET?
In terms of, let me think. In terms of extracurricular involvement, I'd say DECA was probably the primary motivating factor, but certainly the experience I had at PET, taking the different courses and also some of the teachers have helped shape me who I am today. I'd say that for me, at first, I thought about going into business and and law at the same time. So, Mr. Logan, Mr. Gandhi, like some of those teachers have certainly helped guide me to where I am.
Mhm. Amazing. Yeah, we hear, those names come up an often lot
Yes.
about, they've definitely been influential for a lot of people. So I'm glad to hear they've helped you as well. We kind of glossed over the DECA part, but you mentioned like you were interested in business and law. What about DECA made it such a great experience for you?
Okay, frankly, at the end of the day, DECA, it is a competition, but the part that makes DECA fun is all the people you do it with, right? So, if you're involved in DECA, usually you'd get very close with the other members who are also in it, and then I'd say from there you make a lot of close friends that I still stay close with even to this day. And those people, whether or not they continue to pursue business, would certainly be influential to you in terms of how they view different things, helping you along the way in any shape or form.
Right. Yeah, I hear, it's a great collaborative experience. You get to travel, you get to compete with your friends. So great experience, improving your critical thinking skills, your communication skills, things like that. Were there any like experiences like outside of school where you kind of like had an inclination towards business and law?
Um, Outside of school, I'd say that I've always known that I am on. I liked. At first I liked law more. So growing up, I always thought I wanted to be a. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, due to I guess like family influences, seeing shows, watching the Suits, etc. I've also been to like some law summer camps, etc. etc. But slowly, I guess, like throughout high school, I learned that I also have a mathematical side to me. I enjoy like thinking about numbers, learning about business, finance in general. So I would say that I started off more interested in law, but slowly gravitated towards the business side of things. And I'd say some of my extracurriculars with such as DECA was probably one of the prime motivating factors. Again, also some of my friends who are senior to me, alumni of PET at the time, even when I was still in high school, a lot of them went into business, some of them went to Ivy, and have certainly gave me a lot of their perspective on how business and Ivy works. And slowly, I'd say primarily a lot of friends and the mentor figures I had pulled me to that side.
Right. Yeah, I definitely can share that same sentiment. Part of the reason why I started this page is for that mentorship, right? And I think you touched on a good idea of like the self-awareness of, knowing what you're good at, knowing what you like. So it seems like you had your eyes set on Ivy, right? Were there any other schools that were under your consideration?
Frankly, that is not the first school I had. So originally, I rejected Ivy. I was coming back to Hong Kong for university as well. I was going to study at University of Hong Kong for a dual degree between law and business. So in Hong Kong, law is an undergraduate degree, so you don't have to do the undergrad first and then go into law school. So for me, as someone who was sort of still not 100% decided between the two, I thought that it was best for me to do that dual degree so that's I guess make being more efficient in a sense. So the year that I came back, 2019, that's when there were some civil unrest in Hong Kong. Personally, I was fine with it, but my parents got a little bit concerned about, I guess, the safety, everything. And so that summer, I emailed Western and Ivy back, seeing if they would take me. And I actually came back to Canada and started school 1 week into orientation. So
Right.
it was quite a journey for me
Right,
that
right.
year.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting story. I know how, the orientation is, right. It can be difficult transitioning, to any new program. Was there kind of like a culture shock for you when you did end up coming to Western?
Well, not in particular, because I mean, I did high school in at at Pet, so did have some friends going into Western. I guess the biggest cultural shock was I got put into Sogin. So for those of you, for if you know, it's known as the party dorm. At the time, I wanted to switch dorm, but they said, oh, it was completely full, which turned out to be a big fat lie. But it is what it is. It was made the best out of it, but certainly did not get used to that part.
Right. Yeah, I've heard some people have that experience at they call it the zoo. That's what it's called. Yeah, the
It
zoo.
is.
Where if you're not used to that kind of party life, especially at Pet, then it can be a big shock, right?
Yeah.
So you did your first 2 years in, was it BMOS?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, social science. It's under the social science faculty, but it's a business program, right? So you did
Yes.
that. I saw you were involved in a number of clubs like the Pre-Law Society, Mustang
Mhm.
Capital, and then later during your time at Ivy, the Venture Capital Club, right? So a lot of great experiences there. Do any of those experiences stand out for you during your time at Western?
At Western, I'd say that Pre-Law Society was pretty fun. So I got to meet a couple of like-minded individuals, very close, very candid people. Ultimately, decided not to pursue the law side, so I guess kind of dropped out of that. But the experience that was the most unique and fun for me was something called Mustang Capital. So Mustang Capital is a student-run hedge fund where we basically pull together capital and we actually trade on some ideas. If anybody wants to go into business at these universities, I would urge them to try out one of these type of extracurricular activities where either they teach you stuff. So because at the end of the day, school doesn't teach you anything useful. Everything you have to learn it either through extracurricular or by yourself. And these are the clubs where number one, you're going to meet people who you're going to be close with, who can help you along the way, who can provide you with the resources and knowledge to continue on. And number two, it allows you to gain some experience that you can talk about during interviews or later on. And even to this day, I'd say that I am very, very glad that I joined it. It was undoubtedly the most fun experience in terms of extracurricular throughout my university journey.
Right. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, you get that real job experience, right, which helps you after you move on from university. And one of the things we've kind of been alluding to is that like kind of interplay between law and business, right? So when you finally decided, that you want to go all in on the business route, was it kind of like a gut feeling, or like did you think about it for a while? How did that like decision kind of play out?
I'd say that it still wasn't clear to me, even in university, but it's just that by nature of the timeline of these things. So in terms of business, finance in particular, I knew that if I wanted to do business, I would do finance. So finance timeline in terms of recruiting and everything is just extremely expedited. To give you a point of, you might know it's that if you want a third year internship, you would need to get it by second year, like pretty much late first semester, early second semester. So you're basically recruiting for a position over a year out. And then for full time, like usually is returned. So the timeline is extremely expedited. So if you want to get into finance, you got to do it very early and start prepping very early. So was still not 100% decided. So I continued on the finance path. And then later on, as I got the position, I realized that, hey, this is something that I might be interested in. Perhaps it's not worth it for me to continue on the law path. And just at the end of the day, after I guess a little bit of indecisiveness, inaction, etc., decided to drop the law path.
Right. Did you ever like consider the dual HBA and law school degree like at any point in time?
Yeah, I thought about it. I
Yeah.
actually, let me think. I actually did the LSAT, so I did okay, did fine on it. But for me, I think that if I wanted to study law and practice law, I wasn't certain if I wanted to do it in Canada. For me, I think I would have wanted to do it, perhaps try out the States, but then at the end of the day, just decided not to do so and continued on in the business path.
Right. Yeah. So for what I'm hearing from you is that, Ivy's a great school. You can do tons of things with an Ivy degree, right? So obviously great to hear that kind of thing. And touching on that point, like if you were to kind of like pitch Ivy to someone who's not sure about going, how would you kind of frame it to convince them to go?
Frankly, I don't know if I would be pitching Ivy, but I guess in order to be honest about how Ivy works, you gotta understand that number one, at the end of the day, school doesn't matter unless you're studying for something more on the technical side. For business, finance in particular, you're not gonna learn anything in school that's useful. Least of all Ivy. Ivy is a school that does not care about academic, at least at the undergraduate level. All your marks are curved. Everyone gets the same mark. So Ivy really emphasizes the making connections, connecting with alumni, and learning through extracurriculars because nobody cares about academics, frankly. So if you, I believe Nathan, you study at Ivy as well, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so you probably understand exactly what I'm talking about. So everyone at Ivy cares a lot more about extracurriculars, maybe trying to network with others, etc., which isn't for everyone, and it's certainly not the right way to go about it if it were any other more technical fields. But for business, where unless you're trying to go into the more academic route of business, then that is probably a more efficient way to go about it. And at the end of the day, there are some very smart individuals at Ivy who place at very good firms or can pursue very interesting paths of their own. So being able to connect with those individuals is very important. And at least in North America, I'd say that's the Ivy name is pretty established. So you can easily get to a lot of these places and connect with those individuals that you need.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about, the whole networking thing. It's something that is definitely preached, at least to me. So I'm glad you touched on that. So you touched on, kind of the interplay between extracurricular activities in classroom learning. What were kind of some of your biggest learning points that you had either inside or outside the classroom?
One thing that I'd say outside of the classroom, one thing I learned for me is um, without connections, it's literally impossible for you to do anything in terms of business, maybe finance, more so finance. So what I mean by that is a lot of these roles that people usually go for, if you're trying to go the traditional corporate, the traditional employee route, maybe go into investment banking, etc. In order for you to even get the first interview, you would need to have coffee chatted with someone, had a good networking session with them, maybe have someone vouch for you, put you in the process. Without that degree of connection, it's I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very practically so. Because the sheer number of applications that these firms get, the number of data that they have to sift through, nobody's gonna read through all the resumes, nobody's gonna go through all the details that everyone submits. At the end of the day, especially if you have been on the other side of an interviewing process, even for clubs and things like that, you would know that there's a certain degree of, I wouldn't say nepotism, but a degree of if I know that person, it's much easier for me to continue on the process with that person because I sort of know I might vibe with that person. So that is something that I certainly realize midway through university, how important it is.
Yeah, totally agree with that. The whole networking, the familiarity with a person, you just trust them a lot more when you get to know them rather than just calling in someone you don't know. So that definitely helps in a lot of aspects. So you then moved on to Hong Kong to work at UBS, right? So you mentioned before that you wanted to study in Hong Kong earlier. So how did you kind of navigate that transition from Canada to Hong Kong? Like, how did that transition and recruitment go for you?
So in terms of, let's break it down. So in terms of recruitment, the process and dynamics in Hong Kong is actually very different. So in terms of timeline, it's a little bit more delayed compared to North America. So basically, after the North American rounds, I proceeded with the Hong Kong rounds. In terms of the dynamics of recruitment, it's also quite different here. For those who might be interested in finance, the technical side of things is actually not as rigorous in Asia, perhaps because of the degree of sophistication for Asian investors. Second of all, actually, what I just said about North America in terms of networking, etc., does not really apply to Hong Kong. What I realize is that there are places that I network with a couple individuals, ultimately did not even get put into the process. And then there are firms where I did not even get to chat with a single person. I was able to proceed. So UBS was actually one of them where I tried to reach out to individuals, nobody responded, but somehow I still put into the process. And so they care more about academic performance or extracurriculars, just resume screening here. In terms of the culture of coming back, I would say because I was born in Hong Kong and then I went over to Canada for high school, so I sort of knew how living here is like. I have some relatives here, so the transition is probably a lot easier for me compared to other people who wants to come blindly here. But one thing that I do want to mention and something that I did not really consider when I first decided to come back is that at first I thought about, okay, practically speaking, maybe compensation, taxation here, like all the living environment, etc. To me, Hong Kong seemed like a better choice. But one thing I did not consider was all the friendship, all the people that I know, my network, etc., stayed mostly in North America, Canada, or in Toronto mostly, or maybe in New York, US, parts of US, etc. So coming here, I basically came back blind and didn't know that many people. In investment banking, because you're working day in and day out, it doesn't really matter at first. But what I realized is as I like got some free time, free some time up, um, it gets progressively more difficult to kind of grapple with that. So obviously, I'm still trying my best to perhaps reach out to other individuals, try to meet new friends, reach out to Alumni Association in Hong Kong for Ivy. But yeah, that is a consideration that I would say I did not think thoroughly enough. And ultimately, I would say it was actually a pretty important factor that I missed.
Right. Yeah, that's some great color into, Hong Kong, working abroad in general. Really appreciate that perspective that you bring. We've kind of been like dancing around the topic a little bit, but like what is investment banking for people who don't know?
In a nutshell, you're basically there are a couple of sides of investment banking. Primarily, you're helping companies to either complete an IPO, complete an M&A, or some sort of corporate action such as raising bonds, issuing bonds, etc. So on the IPO side is you're helping a company list. So you go through a lot of the regulatory or the basic procedures, etc. For M&A, it's company A buys company B, and then you advise one of them. So for M&A side, you can think of it as like a property agent, but for companies. And then sometimes you just help companies issue bonds, etc., like issue equities. Yeah, it's just corporate solutions in general.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have a very wide, range of solutions that you offer to companies. What's kind of been the skills that you bring to the table that have helped you be successful in this role?
I'd say that in investment banking, at first, if you want to get into investment banking, certainly you would need the technical skills. So, especially in North America, the requirement I would say is a little higher, but you would certainly need to know in-depth finance knowledge, understanding how companies are valued, the different methodologies, how you would think about a business, whether or not it's a good business. Once you're on a job, those things are so important, but at the same time, a lot of it becomes managing different things because in investment banking, when I first heard about people cranking out 80, 100 hours, 120 hours a week, I did not believe them. But after you get into it, you realize that there is more than an ounce of truth in that statement. You are, for a lack of a better word, you're being cranked to death every single day. So being able to stay on top of everything, managing timelines, and being able to stay, I guess, stay strong throughout the process is part of the job.
So you touched on, working those long hours, a lot of the solutions you bring to your customers and clients. Um, what's kind of been like the highlight for you so far in investment banking?
So far, I'd say that there are a couple transactions where I'm genuinely interested. So, one of the transactions that I'm currently still working on is actually for a business that's I've known since I was a kid. It's pretty well known in Hong Kong. It's not a big company, but it's interesting to be able to help some companies that you can walk on the street and you can say, "Hey, that's a company that I'm working on right now." Obviously, you can't tell other people that, but you kind of know it in your heart. And second of all, like for some of the smaller transactions where you have a much smaller team of people working on it, exactly that transaction that I mentioned, you're able to take on expanded roles and you get to interact with the company directly or investors directly and be able to, I guess, see the entire process. So every now and then, the CFO of that company just gives me a call on my phone and kind of ask about the latest progress or provide with an update, and then I would help coordinating different things. So it's quite an interesting process to see that play out.
So you touched on before, like the whole networking part of, being in university, that kind of thing. Once you got into like the real world, as we'll call it, what's kind of been the biggest learning point for you there?
I would say that, at least for me, I wouldn't say that it's extremely different, aside from the fact that you're working a lot more. So in university, I'd say that a lot of the stuff that you do, like you're still going doing the 48-hour reports at Ivy, you're still doing the assignments, supposedly reading cases, with a big caveat on the supposedly. So if you do those things, you do extracurriculars, etc., you're still doing something similar. You're still juggling different responsibilities, etc. It's just that you get to be a lot chiller on it. In As you start doing work in investment banking, particularly, essentially you're just doing whatever you're doing, but magnify that by 10 times. So perhaps you won't get as much free time as you used to. So in university, basically every single day after class, I either go perhaps do go to the gym, go home and play TFT with my friends, play Super Smash Bros with my friends, enjoy my time. Yeah, so it's a very fun experience, but obviously you still put in the work in university. It's just that once you get out, you get a lot less of those me time, meeting with friends, etc. But I wouldn't say it's extremely different.
Right. That's some, yeah, great contrast in comparison there. So you touched on, not reading cases, which is, something, I'm sure not a lot of Ivy kids regret. If you were to go back and ask them what they regret, they wouldn't say the fact that they didn't read cases, right? 'Cause everyone goes in without reading cases. Along those same lines, do you have any like regrets, either from your time, throughout high school up until now?
I'd say it's to a certain degree, I would wish I kind of made up my mind sooner. So as I mentioned, like I was still juggling between the two, and at a certain point, what I did realize is it's not feasible for you to try and go for everything all at once, because you're just gonna divert your attention, and you're not able to focus on the things that end up mattering. So, for example, if I did know that at the end of the day I'm gonna go be gunning for finance, then I could have dedicated 100% of my time and learning more about it, joining different clubs, meeting those people instead of maybe delaying a little bit. And at the end of the day, university first year, you would have certain friends from high school. You might know some other people, but it's pretty much the prime time and prime playing ground for you to learn to meet as many new people who might have same interests as you, same vibe as you, and then also to join different clubs and experience out what you like. by mid of first year or maybe going into second year, a lot of people kind of know the path that they would be pursuing. Now, not necessarily saying that's a fixed path that they're gonna go, but people start gravitating towards certain things. And as I mentioned, for finance, the timeline is extremely expedited. So it's important for you to know it in advance so you can prep in advance and then you can to make sure that you succeed on that path.
So yeah, you mentioned, everything's speeding up these days, right? Like everyone feels that pressure of recruiting. Like I've heard even like 2 years before sometimes, people recruit. But looking ahead, you mentioned that path that you're on, right? Are there any like future aspirations, whether it be professionally, traveling, volunteering, going back to school? Are there any aspirations that we can look forward to seeing from you?
Not 100% certain yet, but I think that eventually I might transition out of investment banking. And hopefully, I think I'm still interested in the finance side of things. So probably looking towards other roles in that area. And I'm still not 100% certain about Hong Kong versus Canada yet. So at this point, I think I'm still keeping my options open, still thinking about it. This is something that I think I still have some time to think about. But yeah, I'm still interested in coming back, either it's career or maybe just for vacation sometime sooner or later.
Great to hear. Would you ever consider, pursuing that law degree that you've been kind of thinking about,
At
or is
this
that?
point, I have worked with some lawyers in my position, and all I can say is I am glad I did not take that route.
It's a lot of hours, right? A lot of work.
It is still, but I realize that it's not something that I would be interested in, nor would be good at.
Yeah, I think that's also a huge thing about, this network, right? For example, like if you were to take yourself in high school and then you have yourself now and they were to like interact and like talk about what you know now about law, I think that's like a huge like advantage that you would have, right? How you mentioned like you wish that you had it figured out sooner. So I think, having that experience from knowing about it is something that would be super helpful, right? So second last question for you today. If we were to come back, let's say like 5, 10 years from now, and we were to say Adrian is blank, and then there's like a word or a few words in that blank that like you want to be like known for, and people would like associate, with your name. What would those like words be?
Okay, obviously you would want it to be rich, but but I guess like less of that less of those toxic thoughts. I would hope that I am happy or satisfied with where I'm at. So wherever it is, because one thing I would say is I realize is um, it's yes, money, etc. is important, but at the end of the day, it's important for you to find something that you would enjoy doing. So investment, even in the role, not everything is perfect. A lot of it is, my role is quite mundane stuff. But in the off chance that there are some projects that you're interested in, some work streams that you're interested in, that you can take ownership, accountability, and you truly enjoy it, sometimes even if you have to work till like 3 or 4 a.m., it doesn't feel as tiring. And that is something that I have experienced. So
Right. I think that's kind of like the difference between like wealthiness and being rich, right? Like wealthiness is like non-material, satisfaction, fulfillment, things like that, and then material richness is something different, right? So
yes.
last question for you. If you could nominate any number of Peck grads to be on this podcast, who would they be?
Um, a friend of mine, his name's Victor Wu. Same year as me. He's one of the first names that popped up to mind. I think he's been quite active in the entrepreneurship slash VC side of things, and haven't caught up with him in a while actually. So I'll definitely reach out to him. And if you do so, feel free to drop my name.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your insights into being at Ivy, going international, working in investment banking, figuring out which path is for you. I think that was something that I took away for sure from today's talk. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone so much for watching. We'll see everyone next week. Peace out.